All right, this Naplex question has a really long study because it says abstract, background, methods, results, conclusion, which is typical for a study. So when you see this, go straight to the question. So here it says, from the abstract above, what is the relative risk reduction of the primary endpoint of myocardial infarction, stroke, or death from other cardiovascular causes? So relative risk reduction, that's abbreviated RRR. So relative risk reduction, you have to memorize the formula, which is the control event rate minus the experimental event rate all over the control event rate. And if you don't know what these the formula for this is, I'll just write them up here. The control event rate is equal to the number in control group with the event all over the total number in the control group. That's the control event rate, which is here. And as for the experimental event rate, that is equal to the number in the experimental group with the event, all divided by the total number in the experimental group. So when you get asked about the primary endpoint and the relative risk reduction, you should just go straight to the results. Just ignore the background and methods. So the primary endpoint is usually always like the beginning, like the first sentence, and then it'll say like the secondary endpoints after that and the tertiary or other secondary endpoints. So the results here, so they say a total of 4,645 patients were assigned to receive ramipril 10 milligrams daily, and 4,652 were assigned to receive the placebo. So these are the total in each of the groups. So this is the total for the placebo group, 4652, and then this 4645, that's in the experimental group. Control is the placebo, and the experimental is always whatever drug they're using. And so we need to find, so we got this here, the total number in the experimental, and we also have the total number in the control. But now we need to find the total number in the experimental group with the event. So in this case, it says of the patients taking ramipril, so experimental, they say 650 patients reached the primary endpoint. So this is the event in the experimental. And then if you continue reading, it says as compared to 826 patients to receive who are assigned to receive the placebo. So this is the event experiment, the event control, because 826 patients receive placebo, which is control. So now you just plug in the numbers into this formula here. So the control event rate is the number in the experimental group with the event. Oh, sorry, here. The number control event rate is the number in the control group with the event. So that I found here was 826 patients. Placebo had reaching the primary endpoint. Divide that by the total number in the control group, which I found that to be 4,652 in the placebo. Subtract that by the experimental event rate. So I found out 650 patients had reached the primary endpoint in this experimental group, which is the ramipril group, divided by the total number in this experimental group, which is the ramipril group in this case, is 4645. And then divide that all by the CER, which is just a repeat of up here. This formula is easy to remember because relative risk reduction, the term here, this stands for relative, right? Relative means has to be compared to something, the original, which is, that's why the CER is both in the numerator and the denominator, right? Because whereas if you just remove this relative, it's just plain risk reduction, there's no denominator here, if you'll notice in the formula. But if there's a relative, it has to be relative to something. So that's why you have CER both in the numerator and the denominator. So when you solve for that, you're going to get a really basic calculator like this to enter your calculations. So that's why you have to calculate them individually in your calculator. So 826 divided by 4,652, that equals 0.7755804. And then enter this number in your calculator, 650 divided by 4645. That equals 0.139935541. All divided by the denominator CER, which is the same as up here. So that's why I'm just going to copy this 0.177555804 to the denominator. And then when you solve for that, you should get 0.211888919. Always remember to keep as many decimal places as possible until the end. And then now I have my answer. Now they follow what they want, how they want it structured as the final answer. So they want a percentage form. So just move this 2 decimal places over. So 2, so that equals 21.188919%. And then round the answer to the nearest whole number. So this number after the decimal places is less than 5. That's why I just round this number to 21. And you don't include the percent in the final answer because they just say put your answer in the percentage form. So in the computer, you just type in 21 and hit submit. And that's your final answer. So this is the way you should think when you do this sort of question. Just do it as fast as possible. So if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. And so now if you got all that, then I'm just gonna explain the other stuff that you'll see here. So I know, in case you want to know what the primary endpoint was, they tell you here in the methods. Primary endpoint was composite of myocardial infarction, stroke, or death from cardiovascular causes, which is what they're asking here in the question. Primary endpoint of MI, stroke, or death from cardiovascular causes. But you really don't need to know that because as long as they say primary endpoint, that's all you need to know, primary endpoint. And then you'll see here the second question, treatment of ramipril reduced rates of death from cardiovascular causes. So these are like these are all secondary outcomes. Myocardial infarction, and they show the control event rate and the experimental rate for that, stroke. These are all secondary outcomes. In the Naplex, most likely they'll only ask you about the primary outcome only. So just pay attention to only like the first sentence or the second sentence, or whatever where you start seeing data, the results. Yep. So there you have it. There's some more tips. So if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. Thank you.